By the time I sat down in Granite Harbor Life's conference room, I understood that what my sister had tossed into the trash at my grandmother's funeral was not garbage. It was paper sealed, dated, and dangerous, and it was tied to a life insurance policy worth more than $2 million. I didn't yet know which of my sister's lies would surface first, or how far she had already pushed. I only knew someone wanted that paper gone, and that my grandmother had been right about one thing: trust the document, not the story. To understand why I was sitting in that office today, staring at a trembling executive and a predatory lawyer, to understand how I ended up holding the key to a criminal conspiracy that would tear my family apart. You cannot start here. You cannot start with the money. You have to go back to the funeral. You have to go back 48 hours, to the moment standing in the vestibule of the Hawthorne and Pine Memorial Chapel. You have to go back to the moment a lawyer tried to hand me this packet, and my sister, with a smile that could cut glass, intercepted it. You have to go back to the exact moment my sister threw my grandmother's gift into the trash. My life in Shorewood, a quiet village just north of Milwaukee, was designed to be boring. I curated the boredom. I polished it until it shined. We lived in a bungalow on a street lined with old maple trees that turned violent. Beautiful red in October, but for the rest of the year, they simply provided reliable shade. My husband, Henry Aldridge, drove a gray sedan. I drove a white compact SUV. We paid our taxes 2 weeks before the deadline. We separated our recyclables with religious fervor, and we never, ever caused a scene. To the outside observer, and specifically to my mother and sister, my life looked gray. They mistook my stability for a lack of imagination. They did not understand that for me, dullness was a defense mechanism. If you are boring, people stop watching you. And if people stop watching you, they stop trying to take things from you. I worked as a compliance officer for Redwood Meridian Transit Systems. It sounds bureaucratic, because it is. My job consisted of reading the documents that 99% of the population scrolls past to click "I agree." I was the person who actually read the terms and conditions. I checked vendor contracts for liability clauses. I cross-referenced invoice numbers with delivery manifests. I spent 8 hours a day in a cubicle ensuring that a comma was not in the wrong place. Because in my line of work, a misplaced comma could cost the transit authority $50,000 in a lawsuit. I was good at it. I had a reputation at the office. They called me the auditor behind my back, which I think was meant to be an insult, but I took it as a compliment. I did not trust handshake deals. I did not trust verbal promises. If it was not written down, signed, and dated, it did not happen. My coworkers found this exhausting. I archived every email. I took screenshots of Slack conversations that hinted at policy shifts. I kept physical receipts for every expense, organized by month and category in fireproof binders. My family called this trait being difficult. Lyora is so rigid, my mother, Evelyn, would say at Thanksgiving, usually while pouring her third glass of wine. She acts like she is building a court case against her own life. She was not entirely wrong. I was building a case. I just didn't know who the defendant was yet. Henry was the opposite. Henry was soft edges and comfortable silences. He was an accountant, which suggests a love for precision. But in his personal life, he was a man of extreme avoidance. He hated conflict the way a cat hates water. If a waiter brought him the wrong order, he would eat it rather than send it back. If a neighbor played music too loud at 11 at night, Henry would put in earplugs rather than knock on their door. "It is not worth the energy. Lee," he would tell me, using his nickname for me, "why make enemies when you can just adjust?" He loved me, I knew that, but he loved a version of me that he could soothe. He saw my obsession with documentation as a quirk, a manifestation of anxiety that could be managed with tea and reassurance. He did not understand that it was a survival skill. He had grown up in a family where people said what they meant. I had grown up in the Black Mirror orbit, where words were smoke, and the only thing that mattered was who controlled the narrative. That narrative was always controlled by Tessa. Tessa Blackmere was 2 years older than me and consumed all the oxygen in any room she entered. She was not just beautiful, she was compelling. She had the kind of charisma that made you want to agree with her just to keep her smiling at you. She could walk into a funeral and make the grieving widow feel like a supporting character. She could walk into a wedding and, without trying, make the bride look like she was wearing a costume. Growing up, I was the background noise, I was the static, Tessa was the melody. If Tessa had a ballet recital, the whole family mobilized. If I had a science fair, it was nice, dear, and then a rush to get Tessa to her next audition or date. I learned early on that there were two roles in our house, the star and the audience. I was the audience. I was expected to clap, to support, and to never, ever distract from the main event. I remembered my 16th birthday. I had asked for a small dinner, just pizza and a movie with 2 friends. Tessa had come home from college that weekend, crying because a boyfriend had broken up with her. The pizza dinner became a therapy session for Tessa. My friends ended up comforting her while I sat at the end of the table, blowing out the candles on a cake that no one was looking at. My mother had looked at me, seeing my annoyance, and whispered, "Don't be selfish, Leora. Your sister is hurting." That was the refrain of my childhood. Don't be selfish. Tessa needs this. Tessa is sensitive. You are the strong one. You don't need us to look at you. So I learned to stop needing it. I learned to watch. I became an observer. I watched how Tessa would slightly alter a story every time she told it, polishing the details until the lie sounded better than the truth. I watched how my mother would nod along, editing her own memory to match Tessa's version. I realized that in my family, truth was flexible. It was a liquid that took the shape of whatever container Tessa wanted to pour it into. This was why I loved paper. Paper did not change its mind. Paper did not gasp and cry to get attention. Paper remembered. The only other person who understood this was my grandmother, Eleanor. Eleanor Blackmere was not a warm woman in the traditional sense. She did not bake cookies. She did not knit sweaters. She smelled of peppermint tea and old library books. She had spent 40 years working in payroll auditing for a manufacturing firm, and she had the eyes of a hawk that could spot a field mouse from a mile up. She lived in a small house 3 blocks from the lake, a house that was paid off, maintained with military precision and devoid of clutter. While the rest of the family treated Eleanor as a slightly embarrassing relic, someone to be visited on holidays and tolerated, I went to see her every Tuesday evening. It was our ritual. I would bring takeout Thai food, and we would sit at her kitchen table. We did not talk about boys or fashion or the drama Tessa was currently starring in. Eleanor would ask me about my job. "Did you catch anything this week?" she would ask, her eyes gleaming behind her bifocals. "Found a vendor trying to bill for travel time that wasn't in the contract," I would say. "Saved the department $600. "Good," she would nod, satisfied. "Details matter. Leora, the world is full of people who think they can round up. They think nobody counts the pennies, but the pennies are where the truth lives." Eleanor was the only person who looked at me and saw a whole human being. She did not ask me when I was going to have children. She did not ask me why I didn't dress more like Tessa. She asked me what I thought. She asked me for my analysis. She saw through Tessa, too. That was the secret bond we shared. When Tessa would visit, sweeping in with gifts she couldn't afford, and stories about her latest business venture or investment opportunity, Eleanor would sit there, smiling politely, her hands folded in her lap. But after Tessa left, Eleanor would look at me and raise a single eyebrow. "She is leveraging 3 credit cards," Eleanor would say dryly. "I saw the statements in her purse when she went to the bathroom. She buys champagne on credit and asks me for $20 for gas." "Did you give it to her?" I would ask. "Of course." Eleanor would reply, "It is cheaper to give her $20 than to listen to her explain why she needs $100. But as Eleanor got older, as her health began to fray like the edge of a well-worn rug, the dynamic shifted, the sharks began to circle. I noticed Tessa visiting more often. I noticed my mother, Evelyn, suddenly becoming very interested in Eleanor's will, asking questions about the house, about assets, about where Eleanor kept her jewelry. I tried to warn Henry. I told him. They smell blood. They think she has money hidden away. Henry had sighed, putting down his book. Leora, your grandmother lives on a pension. She clips coupons for cat food, and she doesn't even have a cat. What money could they possibly be after? You are being paranoid. You are looking for a fight. I am looking for patterns, I had snapped. And the pattern is that Tessa only shows up when she needs something. Henry had taken my hand, his palm warm and dry. Just let it be. If you accuse them of greed, you look like the greedy one. Just be the good granddaughter. Be there for her. So I was. I was there when the cancer moved from a possibility to a certainty. I was there for the chemo appointments that Tessa was too busy to attend. I was there when Eleanor moved into hospice care. It was during one of those final visits, about 3 weeks before she died, that the conversation happened, the conversation that had been playing on a loop in my head ever since Mark Halloway dropped that file on the table. The hospice room was quiet, filled with the hum of the oxygen machine. Eleanor was small in the bed, her skin like parchment paper stretched over fragile bones. She was lucid, though her eyes were as sharp as ever. She had asked me to close the door. She had asked me to bring her the glass of water, and after she took a sip, she gripped my wrist. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong, fueled by a final, desperate urgency. Leora, she had whispered. Her voice was raspy, stripped of its former strength. Listen to me. I'm here, Grandma, I said. When I go, she said, they will start looking. Evelyn, Tessa, they will tear the house apart looking for money. They won't find much. Will they? I asked gently. I wanted to reassure her that it didn't matter. We know you lived simply. Eleanor's eyes locked onto mine. There was a fierce intelligence burning in them. I lived simply because I was preparing. I have been preparing since your grandfather died in 1985. She took a ragged breath. They will tell you there is nothing. They will say the accounts are empty. They might even tell you I died in debt. Do not believe them. Okay, I said, thinking she was perhaps confused by the medication. I believe you. No, she hissed, shaking my arm slightly. Do not just believe, verify. That is what I taught you. Trust the paper. I have left something for you, not for them, for you. Because you are the only one who will not spend it on a lie. She pulled me closer. There is a policy. I have protected it, but they will try to make it disappear. If they say it is gone, if they say it is invalid, if they throw it away, you dig it out. Do you understand me? You dig it out. I understand, I promised, though I did not fully grasp the magnitude of what she was saying at the time. I thought she meant a few $1,000s in a savings bond, maybe an old jewelry box hidden in the attic. Good, she whispered, releasing my arm. She settled back against the pillows, closing her eyes. Be the person who reads the fine print. Leora, it is your best weapon. That was the last clear conversation we had. After that, the morphine took over, and she drifted into a twilight state until the end. When she died, the grief was a heavy, dull ache in my chest, but mixed with the grief was a simmering anxiety. I watched my mother and sister. They did not look like people mourning a matriarch. They looked like people waiting for the reading of a will. They looked hungry, and I, standing in the background in my sensible black shoes, holding Henry's hand, felt the old instinct kicking in, the instinct to document, to observe, to wait for the inevitable error. I did not know then that the error would happen at the funeral home. I did not know that Tessa's arrogance would be so vast that she would throw the evidence into a trash can in a public lobby. But looking back, it made perfect sense. Tessa had spent her entire life believing she was the protagonist of the universe. She believed that if she destroyed a piece of paper, the truth written on it ceased to exist. She thought reality was something she could edit. She forgot that she had a sister who made a living out of retrieving deleted files. She forgot that she had a sister who didn't mind getting her hands dirty if it meant finding the truth. And she certainly forgot that our grandmother was a payroll auditor who had spent 40 years anticipating theft. I sat in my car in the driveway of our Shorewood home, the engine ticking as it cooled. The file from the insurance company sat on the passenger seat. It felt radioactive. Henry was inside, probably making dinner, probably hoping that I would come in and tell him that the meeting was nothing, just a formality, that we could go back to our quiet, peaceful life. I looked at the house. I looked at the warm yellow light spilling from the kitchen window. I knew that if I walked in there and told him the truth that my sister was a felon and we were about to start a war, he would beg me to stop. He would tell me that $2 million was not worth losing my family. But he didn't understand. I wasn't losing my family. My family had already left me behind years ago. They had left me in the background. I picked up the file. I ran my thumb over the edge of the paper. It was sharp. I wasn't doing this for the money. I was doing it because Eleanor had asked me to. She had asked me to verify. And I was going to verify every single lie Tessa had ever told, starting with this one. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cold night air. The silence of the suburbs felt different now. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like the deep, indrawn breath before a scream. The news of my grandmother's death did not come with a weeping phone call in the middle of the night. It did not come with a request for comfort or a shared moment of silence. It arrived on a Monday morning like a calendar invite. My mother, Evelyn, called me at 7:15 while I was making coffee. "She is gone," Evelyn said. Her voice was brisk, the same tone she used when she was rescheduling a hair appointment. "It happened 20 minutes ago. The service will be at Hawthorne and Pine on Thursday. Visitation starts at 4. Service at 5. Don't wear that gray suit you like. It washes you out. Wear black." "Mom," I started, gripping the edge of the granite counter. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "I have a lot of calls to make." "Leora," she cut me off. "Tessa is already handling the arrangements. Just be there on Thursday, and please tell Henry to wear a tie that isn't loud." She hung up. I stood there holding my phone, listening to the silence of my kitchen. There was no space for my grief. The logistical machine of the Blackmere family had already rumbled into motion, paving over the loss with efficiency. Tessa was handling arrangements. Of course she was. Funerals were, after all, a stage, and Tessa never missed an opening night. By the time Thursday arrived, the grief had settled into a hard, cold knot in my stomach. Henry drove us to Hawthorne and Pine Memorial Chapel. He reached over and squeezed my hand as we pulled into the parking lot. "You don't have to engage with them," he said softly. "We pay our respects. We hug your mom, and we leave. 2 hours. Tops." "I know," I said, but I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The chapel was a cavernous space decorated in aggressive shades of beige. It smelled of lilies and floor wax, a chemical attempt to mask the scent of mortality. The room was half full. My grandmother had outlived most of her friends, so the pews were populated by former colleagues from the auditing firm, neighbors who felt obligated, and a scattering of distant cousins who were there to see if there was any inheritance to be had. I walked in, Henry trailing a step behind me like a bodyguard. I scanned the room, and then I saw the performance. Tessa was standing near the front of the room, positioned perfectly under the soft glow of a recessed light. She was wearing a black dress that I recognized from a magazine spread Italian wool, tailored to within an inch of its life. Modest enough for a funeral and tight enough to remind everyone that she was still the most attractive woman in the room. She held a lace handkerchief, which she dabbed against her dry eyes with the precision of a surgeon. My mother stood next to her. Evelyn looked tired, but she was leaning into Tessa, letting Tessa wrap a protective arm around her shoulders. They looked like a Renaissance painting of sorrow. Every few minutes, a guest would approach them. Tessa would nod, offer a brave, tragic smile, and accept their condolences with a grace that felt rehearsed. I watched them for a full minute before approaching. "She's good," I murmured to Henry. "Look at her. She's greeting people she hasn't spoken to in 10 years like they are her best friends." "Be nice," Henry whispered. We walked up to them. Tessa saw me coming. Her eyes flicked over my outfit, a simple black sheath dress, and I saw the microscopic judgment before the mask of grief slid back into place. "Liora," Tessa sighed, reaching out to pull me into a hug. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. "I'm so glad you're here. Mom is a wreck." I looked at my mother. Evelyn didn't look like a wreck. She looked impatient. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said. "It's done now," Evelyn said, smoothing her skirt. "At least she didn't suffer. Tessa has been a saint. She organized the catering and the flowers in one afternoon." "It's what Grandma would have wanted," Tessa said, releasing me. "She liked things proper." I bit my tongue. Grandma hated proper. Grandma liked accurate. Grandma liked honest. This pageantry, with its overpriced floral arrangements and soft piano music, was exactly the kind of waste she would have criticized. I stepped away from them as quickly as social protocol allowed. I needed air. I needed to get away from the radius of Tessa's perfume. I drifted toward the back of the room, near a decorative pillar that offered a bit of cover. Henry had gone to find the restroom, leaving me alone in the shadows. That was when he approached me. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 70s. He wore a brown suit that had gone out of style 20 years ago, and he carried a battered leather briefcase. He didn't look like the other mourners. He looked like he was working. He stepped out from the side aisle and stood in front of me. "Leora Blackmere?" he asked. His voice was gravelly but kind. "Yes," I said. "I am Graham Whittaker," he said. He extended a hand. "I was your grandmother's attorney for 30 years, mostly small matters, deeds, the trust for the house." "I remember the name," I said. "She spoke of you. You helped her with the payroll audit dispute in the 90s. A genuine smile cracked his weathered face. "She had a memory like a steel trap, that woman, and she told me you were the one who inherited it." He looked around the room, his eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Tessa and Evelyn near the casket. He lowered his voice. "I am not staying for the service," Graham said. "I find these things difficult, but Eleanor gave me specific instructions. She told me to give you this when she passed. Not at the reading of the will, immediately." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, manila envelope. It wasn't large standard letter size, but it looked stuffed. It was sealed with heavy tape. On the front, in my grandmother's distinct, sharp handwriting, was my name, Leora. "She said to tell you," Graham whispered, pressing the envelope into my hands, "that the numbers don't lie, even when the people do." I looked down at the envelope. It felt heavy in my hand. Not heavy with weight, but heavy with intent. This was the paper she had told me to trust. "Thank you," I said. Leora." The voice cut through the air like a whip. I froze. I didn't have time to hide the envelope. I turned around. Tessa was standing 5 feet away. She had broken away from her admirers and had moved with that silent, predatory speed she had perfected as a teenager. Her eyes were locked on the envelope in my hands. "Who is this?" Tessa asked, her voice sweet, but her eyes hard. She looked at Graham Whittaker with a mixture of suspicion and dismissal. "An old colleague of Grandma's," I said quickly. I tried to slide the envelope behind my back, a clumsy maneuver that fooled no one. "Mr. Whittaker," Graham said, nodding politely. "I was just offering my condolences. And a gift." Tessa stepped closer. She didn't look at Graham anymore. Her focus was entirely on the package. "What is that?" "Leora." "Did Grandma leave something for us?" "It's for me," I said. "It's personal." "We're sisters," Tessa said, her smile tightening. "Nothing is personal right now. Mom is worried about the estate. You know, we need to make sure everything is cataloged. We can't have random documents floating around." Before I could react, before I could summon the will to shout no, Tessa reached out. It wasn't a request. It was a snatch. She moved so fast that I barely registered the motion. 1 second the envelope was in my hand, and the next, it was in hers. "Tessa," I snapped, my voice rising. "Calm down," she hissed. "I'm just looking." "You don't want to make a scene here, do you? In front of everyone." She had me. She always had me with that line. "Don't make a scene." Tessa tore open the flap of the envelope. She didn't treat it like a sacred message from the dead. She treated it like a piece of junk mail she was checking for a coupon. She pulled out the contents halfway a stack of papers, dense with text and dates. I saw her eyes scan the top page. I saw her pupils dilate and then contract. She wasn't reading the words. She was looking for a check. She was looking for a bank routing number. She was looking for immediate, spendable cash. She didn't find it. What she found was paperwork, old insurance riders, a copy of a policy update. She let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, for God's sake," Tessa said. "It's just her hoarding, old policy papers, probably expired years ago." She shoved the papers back into the envelope roughly, crinkling the edges. She was senile at the end. "Liora," Tessa said, loud enough for Evelyn, who had just walked up, to hear. "She was saving garbage. Look at this." Tessa turned toward the entrance of the chapel. There was a large, polished brass trash can sitting next to the guest book podium. "Tessa, give that back," I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "She gave that to me." "I'm saving you the clutter," Tessa said. And then she did it, with a flick of her wrist, a casual, dismissive motion that I would remember for the rest of my life. Tessa tossed the envelope into the trash can. It hit the bottom with a soft thud. "There," Tessa said, dusting her hands off as if she had just cleaned up a spill. "Now, let's go sit down. The service is starting." I stood there, paralyzed. My brain couldn't process the violation. She had just thrown my grandmother's last words to me into a garbage bin in a public lobby. "Mom," I turned to Evelyn, my voice shaking. "Did you see that she just threw away?" Evelyn didn't even look at the trash can. She looked at me with tired, annoyed eyes. "Liora, please, do not make this about you. Tessa is right. Mother kept stacks of old newspapers and bills. We spent all week clearing out the house. It's just trash. Don't be dramatic." "It wasn't trash," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It was addressed to me." "It's paper," Evelyn snapped. "Come sit down. People are staring." Evelyn took Tessa's arm, and the two of them walked toward the front row. Tessa didn't look back, but as she turned, just before her face was obscured by her perfect, glossy hair, I saw it. I saw her profile. I saw the corner of her mouth. She wasn't just annoyed. She wasn't just being bossy. She was relieved. Her shoulders had dropped 2 inches. The tension that had been in her neck when she first saw the envelope was gone. She had looked at the papers, decided they were either useless or more likely dangerous to whatever narrative she was constructing, and she had destroyed them. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Tessa wasn't protecting me from clutter. She was protecting herself from the truth. Henry touched my elbow. He had returned from the restroom. "Hey, are you okay? You look pale. Where's that man who was talking to you?" "He left," I said. My voice sounded mechanical. "Are we going to sit?" Henry asked. I looked at the trash can. The brass rim caught the light. Inside that bin, resting on top of used tissues and discarded programs, lay the lock that my grandmother had told me about. I could have dived into the trash right then. I could have made the scene Tessa warned me against. I could have screamed and clawed and retrieved it in front of everyone, but I looked at Tessa's back as she sat in the front pew, accepting another hug from a well-wisher. If I retrieved it now, she would see. She would know I had it. And if she knew I had it, she would find a way to take it again, or destroy it properly next time. No, my grandmother had been a strategic woman. She didn't yell. She audited. She waited until the numbers lined up, and then she dropped the hammer. "Liora?" Henry asked again. concerned. "I'm fine," I lied. I took a breath. The air still smelled of fake lilies and decay, but now it also smelled like a challenge. "Let's sit down." "Okay," Henry said, guiding me toward the third row. As I walked past the trash can, I didn't look at it. I didn't acknowledge it. I let Tessa believe she had won. I let Evelyn believe I had been cowed into submission. I sat down in the pew, folded my hands in my lap, and stared at the back of my sister's head. "You think it's gone?" I thought, my pulse slowing down into a cold, steady rhythm. "You think you threw it away, but you just told me exactly where to look." The eulogy began. The minister spoke about Eleanor's kindness, which was a lie, and her generosity, which was a misunderstanding of her frugality. I didn't listen to a word of it. I was counting the minutes until the reception. I was calculating the cleaning schedule of the facility. I was planning. Tessa had thrown the first punch. She just didn't realize that the fight hadn't started yet. She thought she was the director of this play, but she had forgotten the most important rule of our grandmother's world: never finalize the audit until you have checked the trash. I watched my sister wipe a tear from her cheek. I didn't cry. I didn't shed a single tear for the rest of the service. I just sat there, waiting for the dark. 3:14 in the morning is not a time for honesty. It is a time for panic masked as concern. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan which was cutting through the darkness in a slow, rhythmic circle. My phone, resting on the nightstand, buzzed for the third time in 10 minutes. I did not need to pick it up to know who it was, but I did anyway. The blue light burned my retinas. It was Tessa, just checking in. The text read, "I know you get anxious after big events. Don't overthink the papers today. Mom is really worried you are going to make a mountain out of a molehill. Sleep well?" I read the message twice. Don't overthink. Mom is worried. It was a masterclass in manipulation. In 3 sentences, she had invalidated my feelings, triangulated our mother against me, and issued a command to let the issue drop. If I had been the Lyora of 5 years ago, I would have felt guilty. I would have texted back an apology. I would have gone to sleep. But I was not that Leora anymore. I was an auditor. And an auditor knows that when a stakeholder sends an urgent communication outside of business hours telling you not to look at a file, that is the exact moment you must look at the file. I threw the covers off. The cold air of the bedroom hit my skin, sharpening my senses. Henry stirred beside me. He rolled over, blinking sleepily. "Lee, what are you doing? It's the middle of the night." "I have to go," I said, pulling on my jeans. I didn't reach for my office slacks. I reached for the thick, rough denim I used for yard work. "Go where?" Henry sat up, rubbing his face. "Honey, please, come back to bed. You're obsessing." Tessa was just being Tessa. She's stressed. Throwing away some old papers isn't a crime. I stopped zipping my jacket and looked at him. In the shadows, his face was soft, pleading. He wanted peace. He wanted the version of the world where families didn't betray each other for money. I loved him for that innocence. But right now, that innocence was a liability. "She didn't just throw away papers, Henry," I said, my voice low and steady. "She intercepted a legal communication. Graham Whitaker didn't give that to her. He gave it to me. So call Graham in the morning," Henry reasoned. "Get a copy. If Tessa threw it away, it's because she thinks destroying the copy destroys the threat," I said. "I need to know what she saw. I need to see what made her shoulders drop. I need to see what made her relieved." "You're going to the funeral home," Henry realized, his voice dropping. "Leora, you can't. That's insane. You are going to go dumpster diving. You have a master's degree. You are a compliance officer." "Exactly, Don," I said. I grabbed my keys and a pair of heavy-duty rubber gloves from under the sink. "I am a compliance officer, and I don't ignore things that people try to force me to ignore. Go back to sleep. Henry." I walked out before he could argue further. The drive to Hawthorne and Pine Memorial Chapel took 20 minutes. The streets of Shorewood were empty. the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows on the pavement. I parked my SUV a block away, behind a pharmacy. To avoid being seen by any early morning delivery trucks or private security patrols. The air was freezing. It was typical Wisconsin January weather, the kind that bites through layers of wool. I walked quickly to the back of the funeral home. My breath plumed in front of me like white smoke. I knew the layout of the building. I had studied the evacuation maps posted on the walls during the visitation. Compliance habits die hard. I knew the reception area backed up to the administrative offices, and the trash from the public areas was usually consolidated in the bins near the loading dock, separate from the biological waste. Thank God. There were 3 large dumpsters. 2 were locked, likely the medical waste. The third one, a standard industrial green bin, was unlocked. I put on the rubber gloves. I didn't feel like a hero in a thriller movie. I felt ridiculous. I felt cold. I felt a wave of nausea. But then I remembered Tessa's smirk. I remembered the way she had dusted her hands off after tossing the envelope, as if my grandmother's legacy was dust. The nausea was replaced by a cold, hard anger. I hoisted myself up the side of the dumpster. It was half full. I clicked on the small tactical flashlight I kept in my glove box. The beam cut through the gloom. I was looking for white bags. The kitchen staff used clear bags. The medical staff used red or yellow. The front of house, the lobby. The reception used white drawstring bags. I saw 3 of them near the top. I reached in, balancing on the metal rim. The smell was cloying wet cardboard, dying flowers, and stale coffee. It was the smell of performative grief. I grabbed the first bag and ripped it open. Paper plates, napkins, half-eaten cookies. I grabbed the second bag, more napkins, a broken flower vase. I reached for the third bag. It was heavier. I tore the plastic. Inside, I saw the discarded programs from the service, hundreds of faces of my grandmother staring up at me from the glossy paper. And there, wedged between a stack of programs and a dry cleaning bag, was the manila envelope. It was stained with a ring of coffee, but it was intact. My heart hammered against my ribs. I snatched it. I jumped down from the dumpster, landing hard on the asphalt. My knees stung, but I didn't care. I shoved the envelope under my jacket and ran back to the car. I didn't open it until I was safely in my own garage, with the door down and the overhead light on. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shaking slightly, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I placed the envelope on the dashboard. I pulled the papers out. The first thing that fell out was not a legal document. It was a small, yellow square of paper, a sticky note, attached to the front of the policy jacket. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was shaky, the loops less defined than they used to be, written perhaps in those final weeks at the hospice. Leora. The note read, "If you are reading this, it means Graham did his job. If you found this in the trash, it means I was right about them. If they threw it away, you pick it up, verify everything." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. She knew, even at the end, while her body was failing. Her mind had been running scenarios. She had predicted Tessa's arrogance. She had predicted that Tessa would see an old envelope and discard it without reading the fine print. If they threw it away, you pick it up. It was a directive. It was a mission statement. I wiped my eyes and turned to the documents. It was a Granite Harbor Life insurance policy. I scanned the summary page. It was a legacy builder plan, initiated 40 years ago. The face value was not listed as a fixed sum, but as a base amount plus cumulative market growth. I turned the page, and there it was. The reason Tessa had panicked, the reason she had thrown this away. Stapled to the back of the policy was a photocopy of a change of beneficiary form. It was dated 6 months ago. The name in the new beneficiary field was typed in bold letters, Tessa Marie Blackmere. But across the face of the document, in thick, violent red ink, was a stamp, rejected, invalid authentication. I looked closer at the signature line. It was supposed to be my grandmother's signature. I knew Eleanor's signature better than my own. She crossed her T's with a sharp, upward slash. She closed her O's perfectly. The signature on the form was a joke. It was shaky, yes, mimicking old age. But the pressure points were wrong. The pen had hesitated at the curves. It was a drawing of a signature, not a natural act of writing. And next to it, in the witness column, was another signature, Evelyn Blackmere. My mother had witnessed the forgery. I sat back in the seat. The leather creaking, the silence of the garage felt heavy. This wasn't just greed. Greed is hoping for a big inheritance. This was a felony. This was fraud. My sister had forged a document. My mother had signed off on it, and the insurance company had caught them. That was why Tessa threw it away. She wasn't just hiding the money. She was hiding the evidence of her crime. She thought that if the rejected form disappeared, the attempt never happened. She didn't realize that insurance companies keep everything. My phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. It was Tessa. Leora. Answer me. Stop being weird. I'm coming over around 10 to help you sort through Grandma's clothes. We can grab brunch. I miss my little sister. Love you. Lily. The switch was jarring. 5 minutes ago, she was scolding me. Now she was using the nickname she hadn't used since we were 12. Lily. It was the name she used when she wanted to borrow my clothes, or when she wanted me to cover for her when she snuck out of the house. It was the sound of a predator trying to lure the prey back into the open. I didn't reply. I couldn't reply. If I spoke to her now, I would scream. I would tell her I knew. And if she knew I knew, she would start destroying more evidence. She would lawyer up. She would spin a story about how she was just trying to help Grandma with paperwork. I needed to be ahead of her. I picked up the policy. Granite Harbor Life. The headquarters were downtown. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 6:15 in the morning. They opened at 8:30. I went inside the house. Henry was asleep, one arm thrown over his eyes. I moved quietly. I showered, scrubbing the smell of the dumpster off my skin. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one, sharp, tailored, intimidating. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I didn't make coffee. I drank a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sun come up over the frost-covered lawn. At 8 o'clock, I walked out to the car. The envelope was still on the passenger seat. In the daylight, the coffee stain looked ugly, brown and jagged, but the papers inside were crisp. I started the engine. I didn't look at my phone, which was now buzzing with a call from my mother. I didn't look at the house where my husband was sleeping, dreaming of a peaceful resolution that was no longer possible. I looked at the envelope. It sat there on the leather seat like an unexploded bomb. It was silent, flat, and unassuming. But I knew that once I walked into that office and placed it on a desk, the explosion would shatter everything. My family, my reputation, my quiet life. But Eleanor had told me to verify. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I wasn't Leora the little sister anymore. I wasn't Leora the background character. I was the auditor, and I was going to work. The lobby of Granite Harbor Life was a cathedral dedicated to the worship of risk management. The ceilings were 30 feet high, supported by pillars of faux marble that gleamed under cold, recessed-y lighting. The air was scented with white tea and ozone, pumped in through silent vents to mask the smell of the city outside. It was a space designed to make you feel small, to make you feel that your problems were insignificant compared to the actuarial tables that governed the universe. I walked to the reception desk. My heels clicked on the polished stone floor, the sound sharp and solitary. I was wearing my navy suit, the one I used for board meetings at the Transit Authority. I held the coffee-stained manila envelope from the dumpster tight against my side, shielding it from view with my purse. The receptionist was a young woman with a headset and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked like she had been 3D printed to fit the aesthetic of the lobby. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome to Granite Harbor. How can I assist you?" "I need to speak to someone regarding a life insurance policy," I said. My voice was steady, clearer than I felt. "Policy number 744920. She typed the number into her sleek, low-profile keyboard. Her fingers moved with the practiced apathy of someone who did this 100 times a day. Then, her fingers stopped. The plastic smile vanished. She blinked, leaning closer to her screen. She typed something else, perhaps a command to refresh the page, and then she looked up at me. Her expression had shifted from polite indifference to guarded alert. "One moment, please," she said. Her voice had dropped an octave. She picked up the phone, pressing a single button. "Mr. Holloway's office?" "Yes." "We have a walk-in inquiry on the Blackmere file." "Yes, the flagged one. She is here now." She hung up and looked at me. "Please have a seat. Ms. Blackmere, someone will be down shortly." She didn't ask for my name. The system had already told her who I was likely to be. That was my first clue that this was not a standard claim. In my world, the world of compliance flags like that meant lawyers were already involved. I didn't sit. I stood by a potted fern, watching the elevator banks. 3 minutes later, a woman in a charcoal suit stepped out. She didn't look like a receptionist. She looked like a handler. "Ms. Blackmere," she asked. "I am Sarah Jenkins, Senior Case Manager. Please follow me." She swiped a key card at a glass turnstile. We bypassed the regular elevators and took a private lift to the 40th floor. The ride was silent. Jenkins stared at the floor numbers ticking up. I stared at my reflection in the brushed metal doors. I looked pale, but my eyes were hard. I looked like my grandmother. When the doors opened, the atmosphere changed. The lobby had been public theater. This floor was the engine room. It was quieter here, heavy with the weight of decisions. Jenkins led me down a long corridor lined with frosted glass offices. We stopped at a conference room at the far end. "Please," she said, gesturing for me to enter. The room was glass-walled, but as soon as I stepped inside, Jenkins pressed a switch on the wall, and motorized blinds descended, sealing us off from the rest of the floor. The view of Lake Michigan was cut into thin, gray strips. "Can I see your identification?" Jenkins asked. I handed her my driver's license. She scrutinized it, comparing the photo to my face, then placed it on a scanner on the table. A green light beeped. "Thank you," she said. She sat down opposite me and opened a folder that was already waiting on the table. "We have been expecting a claim on this policy since the obituary was published on Tuesday. However, we did not expect you to have the physical policy jacket." She nodded at the envelope under my arm. "It was almost lost," I said carefully. "I recovered it." "I see," Jenkins said. She folded her hands. "Ms. Blackmere, before we proceed, I need to clarify the status of this account. There has been significant activity regarding this policy number." "Activity?" I asked. "My grandmother has been bedridden for 6 months." "Not by the policyholder," Jenkins said. She slid a document across the table. "This is the current valuation statement." I looked at the number. I had spent my life watching my grandmother reuse tea bags. I had watched her darn socks because she refused to buy new ones. I had internalized the narrative that we were lower middle class, barely scraping by, and that any unexpected expense was a crisis. The number on the page was $240,515. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't greed, it was vertigo. It was the sudden realization that my entire understanding of my grandmother's life and my own security had been a fabrication. "This is impossible," I whispered. "She lived on a pension." "She lived on a pension," Jenkins corrected, "because she was reinvesting 90% of her actual income into a high-yield annuity trust started in 1985. She was a payroll auditor." "Ms. Blackmere, she understood the power of compound interest better than our own actuaries." $2 million, I repeated. "And," Jenkins added, her voice sharpening, "this policy is the subject of an active fraud investigation." She opened the folder wider, spreading out a fan of documents. They were photocopies of forms, dozens of them. "Over the last 18 months, Jenkins said, Granite Harbor Life has received 14 separate requests to change the beneficiary of this policy. We also received 3 requests to liquidate the cash value early." I leaned forward. The forms were a chaotic mess of desperation. Request to change beneficiary, dated August 4th. Request to grant power of attorney, dated September 12th. Affidavit of lost policy, dated October 1st. And on every single signature line, there it was. The loops were too big. The slant was too aggressive. Tessa Marie Blackmere. And next to it, on the witness line, the shaky, dutiful signature of my mother, Evelyn Blackmere. They tried to take it all, I said. The anger was a cold stone in my throat. While she was dying, they tried, Jenkins said. And they failed. Every single request was rejected. Why? I asked. These signatures are forgeries, but some of them look practiced. Why did you catch them all? The door to the conference room opened. A man walked in. He was in his 50s, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. But he wore it like a shroud. His face was the color of old paper. He was sweating, a sheen of moisture visible on his forehead despite the cool air of the room. This was Mark Halloway. I recognized him from the company website. The branch director? He didn't introduce himself. He walked straight to the table and looked at the spread of documents as if they were evidence of a murder he had committed. They were rejected, Mark said, his voice tight and breathless. Because Eleanor Blackmere came to see me 5 years ago. He pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. He didn't look at me. He looked at his hands, which were clenched on the mahogany table. She came here, Mark continued. She sat in this exact chair. She told me that her health was declining, and she told me that the moment she became weak, her family would try to steal her life's work. I stared at him. She told you that... She was specific, Mark said. She said, "My daughter is weak, and my granddaughter Tessa is a shark." She paid a lawyer to draft a specific lock on this policy, Clause 44. No changes can be made to the beneficiary without the policyholder present in this office. With 2 independent witnesses and a video recording. He looked up at me then. His eyes were haunted. That is the only reason the money is still there. Ms. Blackmere, your sister sent notarized forms. She sent letters from doctors claiming your grandmother was competent. She sent threats of legal action. If that clause hadn't been there, the money would have been wired to Tessa's offshore account 6 months ago. I looked at the rejected forms again. I saw the red stamps. Rejected. Void. So it's over, I said. You stopped them. The money is mine. Mark didn't answer immediately. He reached out and picked up one of the rejection forms. It was dated just 3 weeks ago. Jenkins, Mark said. His voice was trembling. Look at the processing stamp on this one. Jenkins looked. It's standard, sir. Processed by Unit 4. Look at the time, Mark whispered. It was logged into the system at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. Unit 4 doesn't work on Sundays. The room went deadly silent. Mark's finger was shaking as he pointed to a small, alphanumeric code in the corner of the document. That's an override code, Mark said. That code forces the system to bypass the signature verification software. Someone inside this building tried to push this through manually. The only reason it failed is because the Clause 44 lock is hard-coded into the mainframe. It can't be overridden by a human. He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw raw fear. Ms. Blackmere, Mark said, your sister isn't just forging signatures. She has someone inside Granite Harbor helping her. Someone who has administrative access. Someone who tried to break the lock in the middle of the night. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. He grabbed the internal phone on the wall. Get me legal, he barked into the receiver. And get me IT security. Now, I want a trace on user ID. He glanced at the paper. Admin 79. Immediately. He hung up and turned to me. The color had not returned to his face. You need to listen to me, Mark said. This is not just an inheritance dispute anymore. If someone in my company is involved, this is federal wire fraud, and if they were willing to risk their career to push this through. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If someone was willing to risk prison to steal $2 million, they wouldn't stop just because a computer said no. I looked at the envelope I had pulled from the trash. My grandmother's note came back to me. If they throw it away, you pick it up. She hadn't just left me money. She hadn't just left me a nest egg. She had used the money as bait. She knew Tessa couldn't resist it. She knew Tessa would find an accomplice if the front door was locked. Eleanor had set a trap to catch not just her greedy granddaughter, but the corruption that enabled her, and she had left me to spring it. The door opened again, and the corporate lawyer, the man I would later know as the Human Shield, walked in. He carried the chill of the courtroom with him. "Mr. Holloway," the lawyer said, "we have a problem." "I know," Mark said, wiping his forehead. "We have a leak." "It's worse than a leak," the lawyer said, looking at me with cold, assessing eyes. "The police just called. Your sister, Ms. Blackmere, just filed a report claiming you stole financial documents from the estate. She is trying to freeze the assets." I almost laughed. It was so classic Tessa. Accuse the enemy of exactly what you are doing. "Let her try," I said. I stood up. I didn't feel small anymore. The Cathedral of Granite Harbor Life didn't intimidate me. I was the one holding the paper. "She wants a fight, she can have one. But she forgot one thing." "What's that?" Mark asked. "She forgot that I read everything," I said. "And I don't just have the policy. I have the rejection letters she threw in the trash. I have her fingerprints on the cover-up." I looked Mark Holloway in the eye. "And now," I said, "I know she has a partner in this building. So, Mr. Director, you are going to give me every single log file associated with this account, or I am going to the FBI, not just about my sister, but about your internal security failure." Mark looked at the lawyer. The lawyer looked at Mark. Mark nodded. Slowly. "Give her the logs," Mark said. "We are all on the same sinking ship now." I sat back down. I pulled a notebook from my purse. "Start from the beginning," I said. "Who is Admin 79? The transition from the polished, air-conditioned silence of Granite Harbor Life to the financial crimes division of the Milwaukee Police Department was jarring. If the insurance office was a cathedral of wealth, this was the boiler room where the pipes leaked and the heat was suffocating. I sat on a metal chair that had lost one of its rubber feet, making it wobble every time I shifted my weight. Across from me sat Detective Alana Reyes. She was not what I expected. She did not look like the detectives on television who wear leather jackets and drink whiskey. She looked like an accountant who carried a badge. Her desk was a fortress of manila folders, stacked in precarious towers that threatened to topple with a single sigh. "Ms. Blackmere," Reyes said. She didn't look up from the file she was reading. "Granite Harbor Life forwarded their preliminary fraud report to us at 11 this morning. Based on the dollar amount over $2 million and the interstate nature of the wire attempts, this moved to the top of my pile." "They said it was urgent," I said. My voice sounded thin in the small, fluorescent-lit room. "They said there was an insider involved." "We will get to the insider," Reyes said. Finally looking up, her eyes were dark, tired, and completely devoid of patience. "But first, I need to talk to you about the primary suspect, your sister." She spun a monitor around so I could see it. On the screen was a digital timeline, a series of dots and lines connecting dates to documents. "I build timelines," Reyes said. "That is my job. People lie. Money trails get muddy, but timelines tell the story of intent." She pointed to a dot on the far left of the timeline. "This starts 18 months ago, July 2024. The first attempt to access Eleanor Blackmere's accounts. It was clumsy. A request for a password reset, sent from an IP address registered to a Starbucks in downtown Milwaukee. It was denied because they couldn't answer the security question, 'What was the name of your first pet?'" I felt a pang of sadness. "Barnaby," I whispered. "It was a golden retriever." "Right," Reyes said. 2 weeks later, another attempt. This time, they knew the answer was Barnaby, but the request came from a device not recognized by the system. Denied again. Reyes scrolled to the right. The dots became more frequent. "Fast forward 6 months," she continued. "The clumsiness disappears. We stop seeing password guesses. We start seeing forged documents, a durable power of attorney, a medical competency waiver. These aren't downloaded from the internet. Ms. Blackmere, these are drafted using professional legal software. They have the right margins. They have the right citations of Wisconsin state statutes. She tapped the screen. Your sister didn't just wake up one day and decide to steal. She practiced. She studied. Look at the notary seals. She pulled up a side-by-side comparison. On the left was a document from 6 months ago. On the right was the one from last week, the one Tessa had thrown in the trash. The seal on the left is a digital copy, Reyes explained. You can see the pixelation if you zoom in, amateur hour, but the one on the right. That is a physical crimp. She ordered a custom embossing seal with a fake commission number. That takes lead time. That takes a vendor. That takes premeditation. I stared at the embossed seal on the screen. It looked so official. If I hadn't been an auditor, if I hadn't known to look for the license expiration, I would have accepted it as real. Now, look at the signatures, Reyes said. She brought up another image. The top signature was my grandmother's, taken from her driver's license. It was small, spiky, and efficient. Eleanor didn't waste ink. The bottom signature was the forgery from the insurance form. This is what we call a performer's error, Reyes said, her voice dry. When people forge a signature, especially the elderly, they tend to add a tremor to make it look authentic. They shake the pen intentionally. But look at the pressure points. She switched to a heat map view of the ink. A real tremor results in uneven, light pressure because the muscle control is failing, Reyes explained. But here the pressure is heavy and consistent. The person writing this was gripping the pen tight. They were drawing the shake, not experiencing it. It is a caricature of old age. I felt sick. She was mocking her, I said. She wasn't just stealing. She was play-acting my grandmother's weakness. It gets worse, Reyes said. She leaned back in her chair, the springs groaning. When we ran Tessa Blackmere's background, something flagged. Did you know your sister was employed by a nonprofit organization called Silver Comfort about 3 years ago? I frowned. I think so. She said it was charity work. She said she was helping seniors organize their homes. It sounds nice. I didn't pay much attention. It wasn't charity, Reyes said. It was a hunting ground. She pulled a heavy file from the bottom of a stack and dropped it on the desk. The thud echoed in the room. We have 3 other complaints on file involving Silver Comfort employees, Reyes said. Small things, missing jewelry, checks written for consulting fees or organization services, $500 here, $200 there, amounts small enough that families didn't want to hire a lawyer to fight for them, amounts that look like legitimate expenses for a confused old person. Reyes opened the file. We never had enough to prosecute. The victims were often suffering from dementia. The paperwork was technically legal, signed by the seniors themselves. But the pattern is identical. The charm, the helpfulness, the gradual isolation of the victim from their family, and then the service fees start draining the accounts. I felt the room spin. I grabbed the edge of the desk. You mean, I stammered, this wasn't just about Grandma. You mean she has done this to other people? Your grandmother was the whale, Reyes said bluntly. But Tessa has been catching minnows for years. She honed her skills on strangers. She learned how to talk to banks. She learned which forms trigger an audit and which ones slide through. She didn't just want the money, Ms. Blackmere. She made a career out of predation. I thought of Tessa at the funeral, the way she hugged the grieving widows, the way she held their hands. I had thought she was being dramatic. Now I realized she was scouting. She was looking for the next lonely old woman with a checkbook. There is no evidence of physical abuse, Reyes added quickly. Seeing the look on my face, we checked. She didn't hit them. She didn't starve them. She just harvested them. She treated them like crops. Harvested. The word hung in the air. Grotesque and accurate. So what happens now? I asked. You have the files. You have the forgery. Can you arrest her? We are building the case, Reyes said. The insurance fraud is a Class H felony, but because she had an insider at Granite Harbor, this might bleed into federal jurisdiction, wire fraud, conspiracy. We are coordinating with the district attorney, but until we have the arrest warrant signed, she is free. Reyes leaned forward, her expression hardening, and that makes her dangerous. Leora, she knows the insurance claim was rejected. She likely knows by now that you have the papers she threw away. Predators do not like being cornered. They lash out. She's my sister, I said weakly. She won't hurt me. She stole from a dying woman and forged her mother's signature, Reyes countered. Do not confuse shared DNA with loyalty. She will try to contact you. She will try to bargain. She might threaten you. She might try to gaslight you into thinking this is all a misunderstanding. Reyes handed me a card. Record everything, she ordered. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. If she calls, you hit record. If she shows up at your door, you do not open it. You call me. I took the card. My hand was shaking. I walked out of the office in a daze. I had gone in expecting to discuss a bad check. I left carrying the knowledge that my sister was a serial predator who had turned our family into her biggest score. I met Henry in the waiting area. He had been pacing for an hour. He looked pale, his tie loosened, his hair messy. Well, he asked, rushing over to me. What did they say? Can we go home? Is it resolved? It's not resolved. Henry, I said quietly, it's just starting. She's done this before, to other people. I explained what Reyes had told me. I told him about Silver Comfort. I told him about the pattern. Henry didn't get angry at Tessa. He got pale. He looked around the busy police station lobby as if he expected a reporter to jump out from behind a vending machine. Oh, God, Henry whispered. Leora, if this gets out, serial predator, elder abuse. My name is on the deed to our house. My firm handles accounts for conservative clients. If they Google my wife's name and see fraud ring, I am finished. I stopped walking and looked at him. Your firm. That is what you are worried about, Henry. She stole from Grandma. I know, Henry hissed, lowering his voice. And that is terrible. But why do we have to be the ones to prosecute it? Can't we just let the insurance company handle it? Why did you have to give them the timeline? Why are we the face of this? Because nobody else will do it, I said. Mom is helping her. The victims at Silver Comfort were too old or too sick to fight. I am the only one left. Henry, you are destroying our life, Henry said. His voice was trembling, not with rage, but with a pathetic, self-preserving fear. We had a good life, Leora, boring, safe. Now you are dragging us into a criminal investigation. I didn't drag us anywhere, I said coldly. Tessa did. I am just turning on the lights. We walked out of the station in silence. The winter sun was setting, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the parking lot. The air was frigid. Henry walked ahead to unlock the car. I paused on the steps of the precinct, buttoning my coat. That was when I saw it, parked across the street, in the shadow of a parking garage, was a silver sedan. It was a generic car, the kind you see 10 times a day. But I knew the license plate. It was a custom plate, TES-ST. Tessa's car. She wasn't inside. The car was empty, but it was parked directly opposite the exit of the Financial Crimes Division. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. I am here. I am watching. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. Mom is crying. She says you are confused. We need to talk before you do something you can't undo. Meet me at the old diner. Just us. I looked at the silver car. I looked at Henry, who was sitting in our car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, wishing he was anywhere else. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't delete it. I took a screenshot. Record everything. Reyes had said. I walked down the stairs, my heels clicking on the concrete. I felt a pair of eyes on me, though I couldn't see anyone. The city felt different now. The buildings weren't just buildings. They were hiding places. The streets weren't just roads. They were a grid where a predator was tracking me. I got into the car. "Drive," I said to Henry. "Where?" he asked. "Home," I said. "And then I am changing the locks." Henry looked at me, shocked. "On your sister?" "On everyone," I said. "Drive." As we pulled away, I watched the rearview mirror. The silver sedan didn't move, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was the last time it would be stationary. The hunt was on. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the audience. I was the target. The invitation came via a group text message at 4:15 in the afternoon on Friday. It was from my mother. "Evelyn. Dinner at the house. 7 p.m. Roast chicken. Just family. We need to reset." It was not a request. It was a summons. I stood in my living room, staring at the screen. My stomach turned over. A physical revolt against the idea of sitting at a table with the people who were actively trying to defraud me. Henry walked in from the garage. He saw my face and sighed, loosening his tie. "We have to go, Lee," he said. He sounded exhausted. The last 48 hours had aged him. "If we don't go, they will say we are the ones being unreasonable. They will say we are the ones breaking the family apart. We go, we eat the chicken, we listen to their apology, and we put this behind us." "There is no behind us, Henry," I said, putting the phone down on the counter. "There is only a criminal investigation." "Just hear them out," Henry pleaded. "Maybe Tessa has an explanation. Maybe I don't know. Maybe she panicked. Just one dinner. Please. For me?" I looked at my husband. He was a good man. He believed in the fundamental decency of people. He believed that if you just sat down and talked, you could fix anything. He did not understand that some people do not talk to fix things. They talk to reload. "Fine," I said. "We will go, but we play by my rules." "Rules?" Henry asked. "Rule 1, I said, counting on my fingers. "We do not arrive early. We walk in at 7 sharp. Rule 2, we do not separate. You do not go to the bathroom without me. I do not go to the kitchen without you. Rule 3, do not drink anything that has already been poured. If the wine bottle is open, you drink water from the tap." Henry looked at me like I was insane. "Leora, you think your mother is going to poison us?" "I think my sister is desperate," I said. "And desperate people do not have boundaries. And Rule 4, we have an exit strategy. If I touch my left ear, we leave. No goodbyes. We just walk out." I went upstairs to get ready. I did not dress for a family dinner. I dressed for a deposition. I wore a stiff white shirt and black trousers. I pulled my hair back so tight it pulled at my temples. I opened my safe. I took out 3 photocopies, not the whole file, just 3 specific pages from the insurance rejection pile. I folded them and put them in my inside blazer jacket pocket. Then I took out my phone. I downloaded a voice recording app. I tested it. It picked up a whisper from across the room. I set it to record and slid it into my breast pocket, the microphone facing out. "Let's go," I said to the empty room. We arrived at my mother's house at exactly 7 o'clock. The house looked disgustingly normal. The porch light was on. The flower pots were perfectly arranged. It was the house I had grown up in, the house where I had learned to be invisible. Evelyn opened the door before we could knock. She was wearing an apron over a cashmere sweater. She smiled, but her eyes were tight. "You made it," she said, ushering us in. "Henry, you look tired. Come in. Come in. Tessa is in the kitchen." The house smelled of rosemary and roasted meat. It was a smell that should have been comforting, but to me, it smelled like a trap. We walked into the kitchen. Tessa was standing by the island, tossing a salad. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a soft cream sweater and jeans, her hair falling in loose, shiny waves. She looked like the heroine of a Hallmark movie who had just returned to her hometown to save the family bakery. She looked up and smiled. It was a sad, brave smile. "Hi, guys," Tessa said. Her voice was soft. Thank you for coming. She put down the salad tongs and walked over to me. She opened her arms. I did not move. I stood rigid, my arms at my sides. Tessa stopped, dropping her arms. She looked hurt. Okay, she said. I deserve that. I know I do. Let's eat, Evelyn said brightly, clapping her hands. Everything is hot. We sat at the round oak table. The table was set with the good china, the plates with the gold rim that we were only allowed to use on Christmas. Evelyn poured wine. I watched her hand. She poured from a bottle that was already half empty. Water for me, please, I said. And me, Henry said quickly, glancing at me. Tessa took a sip of her wine. She looked at Henry, then at me. Look, Tessa began, setting her glass down. I want to clear the air. I know things got heated at the funeral home. I know I shouldn't have thrown those papers away. It was a reflex. I was grieving, and I just saw more paperwork. And I snapped. I am sorry. Leora, I really am. It wasn't just paperwork. Tessa, I said. My voice was calm. It was a policy update. I know, Tessa said. She reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled it back. And that is why I want to make this right. Mom and I talked. We don't want lawyers involved. We don't want the estate tied up in probate for years. We want to offer a compromise. A compromise, I repeated. 50-50, Tessa said. Her eyes were wide and earnest. We split everything, the house, the savings, and whatever was in that policy. We just pool it all together and split it down the middle. Sisters, just like Grandma would have wanted. Henry looked at me. I could see the relief in his eyes. He was doing the math. 50% was still a lot of money. It was peace. It was an end to the nightmare. That sounds fair, Henry started to say. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Leora, Evelyn said, her voice sharpening. Don't be difficult. Tessa is being incredibly generous. She is the executor. Technically. She isn't the executor of the insurance policy, I said. I am the sole beneficiary. That isn't an estate asset. It is a contract. And 50% of a contract that belongs 100% to me is not generosity. It is theft. Tessa sighed, a long, suffering sound. It's not about the contract, Lee. It's about fairness. I took care of her. I drove her to appointments. I have her calendar, I said. You drove her to 2 appointments in 3 years. I drove her to 47. Tessa's eyes hardened. The Hallmark heroine was fading. I am trying to help you, Tessa said, her voice dropping a register. You don't understand the complexity of these financial instruments, taxes, fees. If you try to claim this alone, the IRS will eat you alive. I have experience with this. I can handle the back end. Like you handled the back end at Silver Comfort, I asked. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Tessa went perfectly still. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. Evelyn turned her head slowly to look at me, her eyes wide with shock. What did you say? Tessa whispered. Silver Comfort, I said clearly. The nonprofit where you worked 3 years ago. The one where 3 different families filed complaints about missing jewelry and unauthorized consulting fees. Henry kicked me under the table. A frantic signal to stop. I ignored him. I don't know what you are talking about, Tessa said. That was a volunteer gig. I didn't think so either, I said, until Detective Reyes showed me the files. You went to the police? Evelyn shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair back. Leora, you went to the police about your own sister. She committed a felony. Mom, I said. She forged your signature, or maybe she didn't forge it. Maybe you signed it willingly. Which one is it? Did you help her try to steal the money? Or are you a victim too? How dare you? Evelyn spat. We invited you into this house to make peace. You invited me here to silence me, I said. I turned to Tessa. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the tablecloth, her jaw working. She was calculating. I want you to explain something to me. Tessa, I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded papers. I didn't open them. I just placed them on the table next to the roast chicken. I want you to tell me about August 4th, I said. Tessa looked at the papers. She didn't touch them. I don't remember dates, she said dismissively. I filled out a lot of paperwork for Grandma. August 4th, I repeated. You filed a change of beneficiary form. It was rejected. Why? Because the signature was messy, Tessa said quickly. Grandma's hand was shaking. They were sticklers. No, I said. That's not why. The rejection code wasn't for a signature mismatch. It was for a procedural lock. I don't know what that means, Tessa said. She took a large gulp of wine. It means, I said, leaning forward, that even if the signature was perfect, the system wouldn't accept it. So you tried again, and then, 3 weeks ago, you tried something else. I watched her face closely. This was the gamble. You didn't send a paper form 3 weeks ago. I lied. You tried to do it digitally, but you hit a wall. What was the error message? Tessa. It wasn't an error message, Tessa snapped. It was a system freeze. She stopped. Her mouth stayed open for a fraction of a second. Her eyes darted to Henry, then to Evelyn, then back to me. She realized what she had said. I smiled. It was a cold, mirthless smile. A system freeze, I repeated softly. How would you know that the rejection letter they sent to the house, the one you threw away, said, invalid authentication? It didn't say anything about a system freeze. The only person who would see a system freeze is someone looking at the internal Granite Harbor terminal screen. Tessa's face turned a blotchy red. The customer service rep told me on the phone. No, I said. Customer service reps don't see system freezes. Only admins do. You were talking to someone inside, weren't you? You are twisting my words, Tessa shouted. She slammed her hand on the table. The wine glasses jumped. You are obsessed. You are jealous because I was the one who actually understood the portfolio. Grandma's assets were complicated. The legacy growth rider was about to expire if we didn't update the beneficiary status to a younger relative I was trying to save the compound interest. I froze. Henry froze. I looked at Tessa. The legacy growth rider. Yes, Tessa yelled. It had a 40-year cap. If it wasn't transferred, the rate would drop to 0.5%. I was trying to save the money for the family. You idiot. I looked at Henry. Henry, did you know about a legacy growth rider? No, Henry said. His voice was quiet. He was looking at Tessa with a strange expression. And Leora, the policy you showed me, the one from the envelope, it didn't have a 40-year cap. It was a lifetime lock. Exactly, I said. I turned back to Tessa. Grandma's policy didn't have an expiration date. There was no rider that needed transferring. That detail, that legacy growth rider expiring, that isn't in the policy, that is an internal Granite Harbor sales pitch. That is what they tell clients to scare them into switching plans. I stood up. You weren't reading Grandma's policy, I said. You were reading a script. The person inside the company, they gave you a script to justify the fraud. Didn't they? They told you what to say if you got caught. I was trying to save the interest. Tessa stood up too. She was shaking. You think you're so smart. You think you're better than us because you have a boring job and a boring husband and you read the fine print. But you're nothing, Leora. You're a background extra. Grandma didn't love you more. She just pitied you because you were so dull she knew you wouldn't spend the money. Tessa, Henry shouted. It was the first time I had ever heard my husband yell. He stood up. His face was flushed. He looked from Tessa to Evelyn. We are leaving, Henry said. He walked around the table and grabbed my hand. His grip was tight. Now. Henry, sit down, Evelyn commanded. She is just upset. She is a liar, Henry said. He looked at Evelyn. And you sat there and let her do it. You let her steal from your own mother. I was protecting the family, Evelyn cried. Leora was going to waste it. She would just put it in a savings account. Tessa had plans. She has vision. She has a criminal record waiting to happen, Henry said. He pulled me toward the door. If you walk out that door, Leora, Tessa screamed, her voice cracking. You are dead to this family. Do you hear me? I will sue you for everything. I will tell everyone you mentally abused Grandma. I stopped at the doorway. I touched my left ear, not because I needed the signal anymore, but because I wanted to feel the pulse beating in my temple. I turned around. You can't sue me, Tessa, I said calmly, because you are going to be too busy trying to stay out of federal prison. I tapped my breast pocket. And by the way, I said, the police have your timeline. But now I have your confession. You just admitted you knew about the internal system freeze. You just admitted you knew details only an insider could provide. You just tied yourself to the conspiracy. Tessa's face went white. She looked at my pocket. She realized what I had done. She lunged. It was a desperate, animal movement. She scrambled over the chair, reaching for me, her nails clawing at the air. Give me that phone, she shrieked. Henry stepped in front of me. He didn't push her. He just blocked the path. A solid wall of husband. Don't, Henry said. His voice was low and dangerous. Don't you touch her. Tessa stopped. She stood there, panting, her hair wild, her eyes manic. Evelyn was sobbing at the table, her head in her hands. I looked at them. The beautiful kitchen, the roast chicken cooling on the platter, the wine, the lies. It was all rotting. Goodbye, Mom, I said. We walked out the front door. We walked down the driveway to the car. The night air was biting, but it felt clean. We got into the car. Henry locked the doors immediately. He started the engine, but he didn't drive away. He just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Are you okay? I asked. Henry let out a long, shaky breath. She called you nothing. She called you an extra. I'm used to it, I said. Well, I'm not, Henry said. He turned to look at me. His eyes were fierce. You are not an extra, Leora. You are the only real person in that house. He put the car in gear. Did you get it? He asked. On the recording. I got it, I said. I got the system freeze. I got the legacy rider. It's enough to prove she had inside information. Good, Henry said. Then let's go give it to the detective. I'm done with peace. Let's finish this. As we drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. I saw a silhouette in the window. Tessa was watching us leave. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt clarity. The family I thought I was losing had never really existed. It was just a performance. And tonight, the curtain had finally come down. Monday morning at Granite Harbor Life felt less like a business opening and more like a crime scene investigation that had been paused for the weekend. The air in the lobby was just as cold, the marble just as imposing, but the silence had a different quality. It was the silence of people holding their breath. I had returned to initiate the formal claim process. Despite the fraud attempts, despite the police report, and despite the disastrous dinner with my family, the mechanism of the insurance policy still had to turn. I needed to sign the affidavits. I needed to verify the death certificate. I sat in the same conference room on the 40th floor, this time. The blinds were already drawn. Mark Halloway was there, but he was different. On Friday, he had been anxious, a man afraid of a scandal. Today, he looked like a man who had not slept in 72 hours. His tie was slightly askew, a microscopic imperfection that screamed volume in a room this expensive. He kept tapping a silver pen against the mahogany table, a rhythmic, maddening click, click, click that echoed in the quiet room. The corporate lawyer was there too. He introduced himself finally as Mr. Vance. He sat with the stillness of a statue, his eyes tracking every piece of paper Mark pushed across the table. Sign here, Mark said, his voice raspy. This confirms that you are the primary beneficiary and that you are aware of the contestability period. Although given the age of the policy, that is a formality. I took the pen. I signed. Leora Blackmere. The letters looked sharp and angry on the page. "And here," Mark said, sliding another sheet over, "this is the authorization for us to release the funds into an escrow account pending the resolution of the internal investigation." I hesitated. My hand hovered over the paper. The word investigation triggered the auditor in me. "I want to see the logs again," I said. Mark stopped tapping the pen. "Ms. Blackmere, we went over this on Friday. You have the summary." "I have the summary of the rejections," I corrected. "I want to see the access logs for the dates the rejections happened. Specifically, I want to see the log for the attempt on December 24th, Christmas Eve." Mark glanced at Vance. Vance gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Mark typed a command into his laptop and turned the screen toward me. I leaned in. I scanned the lines of code and timestamps. It was a language I spoke fluently. User ID, timestamp, action code, IP address. I traced the entry for December 24th, 2300 hours, attempted access. User ID admin 79, action modify beneficiary field, result failed. Clause 44, lock, but then I saw the line below it. A line that shouldn't have been there. 2301 hours. System alert level downgraded from critical to warning. Authorized by level 5 supervisor. I looked up at Mark. "Someone turned down the volume," I said. 1 minute after the attempt failed, someone manually lowered the security alert so that the system wouldn't flag the failure to the compliance team immediately. That is why nobody called me on Christmas Day. The system screamed, and someone put a pillow over its face. Mark went pale. He pulled the laptop back. "That is a standard glitch response. Sometimes the server resets the alert levels to prevent a crash. Don't lie to me, Mark," I said. "Servers don't have level 5 supervisor clearance. People do. Who has level 5 clearance in this branch?" Mark looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked everywhere except at me. "3 people," Vance answered. The lawyer's voice was smooth, cutting through Mark's panic. "Myself, the chief financial officer, and Mr. Halloway." I looked at Mark. The blood had drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. "I didn't do it," Mark whispered. "I swear to God, I was at home with my family. It was Christmas Eve." "Then someone used your credentials," I said. "Or you are lying." "Ms. Blackmere," Vance said, leaning forward. "This is why we have opened a parallel investigation. We are not just looking at your sister. We are looking at a potential compromise of our executive leadership credentials. We suspect that there is a bridge between the external party, your sister, and an internal actor who has harvested login details." "Harvested?" I asked. "You mean hacked?" "I mean sold," Vance said. "We believe someone in this office is selling override codes to fraud rings." The room seemed to tilt. This was massive. This wasn't just Tessa trying to grab a quick $2 million. This was a marketplace. "Does Detective Reyes know this?" I asked. "We are cooperating fully with the authorities," Vance said, which was lawyer speak for we are telling them as little as possible to avoid a stock price collapse. I stood up. I felt suffocated. I needed to get out of this room, away from Mark's sweating face and Vance's reptile eyes. "I signed the papers," I said. "Put the money in escrow. But do not think for a second that I am waiting for you to fix this. I am going to find out who turned off that alarm." I walked out. Mark didn't stand up to shake my hand. He was staring at his laptop screen as if it were a bomb counting down. I met Henry for lunch at a small deli 3 blocks away. It was a safe distance. The deli was noisy, filled with the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation, the kind of white noise that made eavesdropping impossible. Henry looked better than he had on Friday. The confrontation with Tessa seemed to have flipped a switch in him. He wasn't the peacekeeper anymore. He was the strategist. I showed him the notes I had scribbled down in the meeting. "Level 5 clearance," Henry muttered, chewing on his sandwich. "That is top of the food chain. Lee, that isn't a clerk. That isn't a secretary." "Mark said he didn't do it," I said, "but he looked guilty as hell." "Guilty of the fraud or guilty of negligence?" Henry asked. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. In my line of work, we see this a lot. Executives are lazy with their passwords. They write them on sticky notes. They share them with their assistants because they can't be bothered to log in themselves. It is possible Mark is innocent of the theft, but guilty of leaving the keys in the ignition. But the timing, Henry, I argued. Christmas Eve, midnight, that isn't a sloppy assistant. That is precise. That is someone who knew exactly when the IT team would be on Skeleton Crew. Henry took the notepad from me. He drew a diagram, a circle for Tessa, a circle for Granite Harbor, and a line connecting them. Tessa isn't a hacker, Henry said. We established that. She is a social engineer. She charms people. She manipulates. Who does she know at Granite Harbor? Did she date anyone there? Did she go to school with anyone? I don't know, I admitted. Tessa's social circle is a black hole. She knows everyone and no one. My phone chimed. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification. I picked it up. The subject line was blank. The sender was a scrambled address, a string of random characters that indicated a burner account. I opened it. The body of the email was short. Don't trust the director. He is not the one who lowered the alert, but he knows who did. Ask him about the consulting fee paid to a shell company in the Caymans on January 12th. Ask him why he signed off on a $50,000 invoice for external audit support. That never happened. Below the text was an attachment, a single image file. I clicked it. It was a screenshot of an internal Granite Harbor wire transfer request. Amount $50,000. Approver Mark Halloway. Recipient Apex Solutions Limited. And in the memo field, a code RefSC-TB-22. I stared at the code. TB. Tessa Blackmere. Henry, I said, sliding the phone across the table. Look at this. Henry looked. His eyes widened. Where did you get this? Anonymous, I said. Just now. This is an invoice approval, Henry said, analyzing the image. Mark signed off on $50,000 to a shell company, Apex Solutions. That is a classic laundry setup. And the code, I pointed to the memo line, SC-TB-22, Silver Comfort, Tessa Blackmere, 2022. Silver Comfort, Henry whispered. The nonprofit where she worked, the one Reyes told you about. Mark didn't just leave his password out, I realized, my voice rising in excitement. He paid her. He authorized a payment to a company linked to her previous scam. He isn't a victim of identity theft. Henry, he is on the payroll. Or, Henry said, playing devil's advocate, he is being blackmailed. Maybe Tessa has something on him. Maybe she forced him to pay. Either way, I said, standing up and throwing cash on the table. He lied to me. He sat in that room and acted like he was shocked. We need to go to Reyes. Now. We drove straight to the precinct. The drive was tense. I kept looking at my rearview mirror, expecting to see the silver sedan. But the road was clear. Detective Reyes was at her desk, looking even more exhausted than before. When I showed her the email and the screenshot, she didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. We know about Apex Solutions, Reyes said. We flagged that account 3 days ago. It is a funnel. Money goes in from various corporate accounts, insurance, real estate firms, and it goes out to crypto wallets in Estonia. So you know Mark Halloway is involved, I asked. We know his signature is involved, Reyes corrected. But here's the thing. Leora, we pulled the metadata on that transfer. It wasn't authorized from Mark's computer. What? I asked. It was authorized from a remote terminal, Reyes said, using a VPN, but the authorization key, the digital token, belonged to Mark. That means someone stole his token, or he gave it to them. He looked terrified today, I said. He looked like he was going to throw up. Because he knows he is compromised, Reyes said. We interviewed him yesterday. Informal. He claims he lost his security fob 2 months ago and didn't report it because he didn't want to be penalized by corporate compliance. He thought it fell out of his pocket at a golf course. A golf course, I scoffed. Convenient. But here is the connection you need to worry about, Reyes said. She pulled up a new document on her screen. We traced the IP address of the person who sent you that anonymous email, the one you just got. Who was it? I asked. It wasn't a hacker, Reyes said. It came from inside Granite Harbor Life, from a workstation on the 40th floor. I froze. Mark sent it. No, Reyes said. Mark was in the meeting with you when you received it. He couldn't have sent it. It came from the desk of the legal department. The lawyer? I asked. Vance. We are checking the personnel logs, Reyes said. But it seems you have a guardian angel inside the building, someone who wants to burn Mark Halloway, or someone who wants to distract you from the real culprit. Reyes leaned forward. This email, RefSC-TB-22, that code doesn't exist in the official ledger. We checked. That memo line was added to the screenshot. It was photoshopped. What? I said. The payment is real, Reyes said. The $50,000 is real, but the reference to your sister, that was added. Someone is trying to make sure you blame Mark and Tessa specifically. Why would they do that? Henry asked. To control the narrative. Reyes said, if you focus on Mark, you stop looking at the rest of the department. If you focus on Tessa, you stop looking at the systemic failure. This is a game, Leora, and someone is moving the pieces to make sure Mark takes the fall. I thought about the meeting, the way Vance had sat there, silent, watching, the way he had calmly announced the internal investigation, throwing Mark under the bus. Vance, I whispered. The lawyer. He was the one who told me about the mole. He was the one who pointed the finger at the executive leadership. We are looking into him, Reyes said. But right now, I need you to stay safe. This email proves that someone inside knows you are getting close. They are feeding you information. That makes you a player. I am not a player, I said. I am a beneficiary. Not anymore, Reyes said. Now you are a witness. She handed me a photocopy of a new document. We found this in the trash of the notary service your sister used, Reyes said. It is a ledger, a list of clients. Tessa is on it. But so is another name. I looked at the list. Client Tessa Blackmere, Service Expedited Seal, and 3 lines down. Client Granite Harbor Legal Department, Service Bulk Processing. The legal department uses the same crooked notary as my sister, I asked. It's a small world in the fraud business, Reyes said. It seems Granite Harbor has been using this service to fast-track paperwork for years. Tessa didn't find a mole, Leora. She just walked into a room where everyone was already dirty. I walked out of the station feeling heavier than before. The line between the good guys and the bad guys was blurring. Mark was a coward. Tessa was a thief. Vance was what a puppet master Henry drove us home. The sun had set, and the streetlights were flickering on. It is the lawyer, Henry said. Vance. He is the one. He sacrificed Mark to save himself. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they are all in it together. I looked out the window. We were turning onto our street. Henry, I said. Stop the car. What? Henry asked. We are 2 houses away. Stop the car, I shouted. Henry slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt. Look, I pointed. Parked in our driveway, blocking the garage, was the silver sedan, TES-ST, but it wasn't empty this time. The dome light was on. And sitting in the driver's seat, illuminated by the yellow glow, was not Tessa. It was Mark Halloway. He was slumped over the steering wheel. His head was resting on the horn, but the sound was silent. The fuse likely pulled, or the battery dead. Oh my God, I whispered. Stay in the car, Henry ordered. He reached for his phone to dial 911, but I was already opening the door. I had to know. I had to verify. I ran toward the silver car. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I reached the driver's side window. Mark was breathing. I could see the condensation on the glass, but he was shaking violently. He was clutching a manila envelope identical to the one I had found in the trash. He looked up. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror that was absolute. He rolled down the window an inch. "They know," Mark whispered. His teeth were chattering. "They know you found the rejection letter. They told me to come here. They told me to give you the rest." "Who?" I demanded. "Who told you?" Mark pushed the envelope through the crack in the window. "The director." Mark choked out. "Not me. The real director." He shoved the envelope into my hands and fumbled with the gear shift. He threw the car into reverse, nearly hitting our mailbox, and peeled away into the night, leaving tire tracks on the frozen lawn. I stood there in the driveway, holding the envelope. Henry ran up to me, breathless. "What did he say?" Henry asked. "Who is it?" I looked at the envelope. It wasn't sealed. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, grainy. It showed a company picnic from maybe 20 years ago. A group of young Granite Harbor employees standing under a banner. I recognized a young Mark Halloway. I recognized a young Vance. But standing in the middle, with her arm around Mark's shoulders, smiling that same dazzling, predatory smile I knew so well, was a young woman. She wasn't an employee. She was a guest. It was Tessa. And standing next to her, holding a beer, laughing as if he owned the world, was a man I had seen only once, years ago, at a distant family reunion. My father. The man who had left us when I was 5. The man who was supposed to be in California. I turned the photo over. On the back, in my father's handwriting, was a date: Granite Harbor Picnic, 2005, and a note: "Start them young." The secret wasn't that Tessa had found a mole. The secret was that our father had planted the seeds of this fraud 20 years ago, before he abandoned us. Mark Halloway wasn't just a colleague. He was an old friend of the family. The system hadn't been broken by Tessa. It had been built by our father, and Mark and Tessa were just the heirs fighting over the controls. The call from Tessa's lawyer came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 12 hours after Mark Halloway had screeched out of my driveway, leaving tire tracks on the lawn and a photograph of my father in my hand. The lawyer introduced himself as Mr. Sterling. His voice was smooth, the vocal equivalent of a polished marble floor, designed to make you slip if you weren't careful. "Ms. Blackmere," he said, "I represent your sister. We are aware that you have been in contact with the authorities regarding the insurance matter. We believe there has been a significant escalation of misunderstandings." "It is not a misunderstanding when there is a police timeline," I said, holding the phone against my shoulder as I sorted through the morning mail. "It is a felony. We would like to propose a civil resolution," Sterling continued. Ignoring my comment, "Tessa is willing to withdraw all claims to the estate. She is willing to sign an admission of administrative error regarding the beneficiary forms. In exchange, we ask that you decline to testify in any criminal proceedings and support a motion for a suspended sentence based on family hardship." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "She wants me to help her avoid prison after she stole my identity, after she turned my grandmother's death into a payday." "Tessa is fragile," Sterling said. "Prison would destroy her, and frankly, a trial would destroy your family's reputation. Do you really want the press digging into your father's history with Granite Harbor? We know about the photo. Leora, if you go to court, that photo becomes public record. Your father's legacy as a fraudster becomes the headline." I stopped sorting the mail. They were using the photo as leverage. They thought the shame of my father's past would silence me. They didn't understand that I had no pride left to wound. "My father left us 20 years ago," I said. "I don't care about his legacy. I care about justice for the women Tessa scammed at Silver Comfort. I am not signing anything." "Wait," Sterling said, his voice losing its polish. "Tessa anticipated you might say that. She has authorized me to offer one more thing. Something that isn't monetary. I am listening. She wants to meet, in person, at my office. She says she has information about the night Eleanor died. Information that isn't in the hospice report." I felt a chill go down my spine. "What kind of information?" "She says Eleanor left something with her, a contingency, She is willing to give it to you, but only if you look her in the eye. I agreed, not because I wanted to see her, but because I knew my grandmother. Eleanor never did anything without a backup plan. If Tessa was holding a piece of the puzzle, I had to retrieve it. The meeting took place at 2 in the afternoon. Henry drove me. He wanted to come in, but I told him to wait in the lobby. This was between sisters. Sterling's office was all glass and chrome, overlooking the city. Tessa was sitting at the far end of a long conference table. She did not look like the woman who had thrown the envelope in the trash. The glamour was gone. She was wearing a gray sweater that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair, usually a glossy shield, was pulled back in a messy knot. She wore no makeup. The circles under her eyes were dark purple bruises of exhaustion. She didn't stand up when I entered. She just looked at her hands. "You look tired," I said, sitting at the opposite end of the table. "Mister?" Sterling stood by the window, a silent chaperone. "I haven't slept since the funeral," Tessa said. Her voice was raspy. "Mom calls me every hour screaming about what the neighbors will say. Mark Halloway is texting me threats, and I keep seeing Grandma's face." "You should have thought about that before you forged her signature," I said. "I didn't do it for the money. Leora." Tessa said. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. "I mean, I did, but not just for the cars or the clothes. I did it because Dad told us to." "Dad is in California," I said. "Or he was." "He came back," Tessa whispered. 3 years ago. He found me. He told me he had built a system inside Granite Harbor before he left. He said it was our inheritance. He said Mark was keeping it all for himself and that we deserved a cut. He groomed me, Leora, just like he groomed Mark back in 2005. I looked at her. It was pathetic, and it was probably true. Tessa had always been desperate for approval. If our absent father had returned and offered her a way to be smart, to be an insider, she would have taken it. "That doesn't excuse silver comfort," I said. "Dad didn't make you steal rings from old ladies." Tessa flinched. "That was practice. Dad said I needed to learn how to handle the elderly, how to get them to sign things." "You are sick," I said, "and you are going to prison." "I know," Tessa said. She slumped in her chair. "I know I am. Mark is going to turn on me. Mom is already pretending she didn't know anything. I am the fall guy. I always am. The star gets the applause, but she also gets the tomatoes." She reached into her oversized bag. "Mr. Sterling took a step forward, but Tessa waved him off. She pulled out a small white envelope. It was old. The edges were yellowed. It was sealed with wax-red wax, stamped with a heavy signet ring. "The night Grandma died," Tessa said, her voice shaking. "I was there. You went home to shower. Mom was getting coffee. I was alone with her." I leaned forward. "What did she say?" "She woke up," Tessa said. "She was lucid, scarily lucid. She looked at me and she grabbed my hand. She said, 'Tessa, I know what you and your father are planning. I know about the forms.'" I held my breath. "I tried to deny it," Tessa continued, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But she laughed. She actually laughed. She said, 'You are not smart enough to trick me, child, but you are smart enough to know when you have lost.'" Tessa slid the envelope across the table. "She made me take this. She said, 'Put this in your purse. If you succeed in stealing my money, burn it. But if Leora catches you, and she will catch you, then you give this to her. It is the only thing that will save your soul.'" I stared at the envelope. It had my name on it in Eleanor's handwriting. "Leora, why are you giving it to me now?" I asked. "Because she was right," Tessa sobbed. "You caught me, and I'm tired of carrying it. It feels hot. It feels like it's burning a hole in my bag." I reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy, just like the policy packet had. "Is this part of the plea deal?" I asked Sterling. "No," Tessa answered before he could. "Sterling told me to burn it. He said it is probably more evidence, but I can't. I can't defy her one last time. I stood up. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket. I am not signing your deal. Tessa, I said. I am going to testify, and I'm going to tell the jury everything, including this. Tessa nodded. She didn't fight. She looked relieved, as if the punishment was easier to bear than the waiting. I know, she whispered. Just tell Henry I'm sorry I called him boring. I walked out of the office. My phone started ringing the moment I stepped into the elevator. It was Evelyn. I answered. I put it on speaker so the echo of the elevator shaft would amplify her madness. Leora, Evelyn shrieked. Did you sign it? Did you take the deal? No, Mom, I said. I didn't. You selfish, ungrateful child. Evelyn screamed. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? The gossip Mrs. Gable down the street asked me if the police cars were for a drug bust. I had to lie. I had to say it was a security alarm malfunction. You are humiliating us. Tessa admitted everything, I said calmly. She admitted Dad was involved. Did you know Dad was back? Mom. There was a silence on the other end, a thick, guilty silence. He wanted to help, Evelyn stammered. He said he could secure our future. He used his daughters as mules for a fraud scheme, I said. And you let him because you wanted the money. I wanted security, Evelyn wailed. I am an old woman, Leora. I deserved better than a pension. If you go to the police, I will tell them you are unstable. I will tell them you forced Tessa to do it. Goodbye, Mom, I said. Don't you hang up on me. I am your mother, Leora. I hung up. I blocked the number. It was the hardest button I had ever pressed. But as soon as I did it, the weight on my chest lightened. I walked out into the lobby. Henry was waiting. He stood up when he saw me. He looked at my face, then at the phone in my hand. Evelyn, he asked. Blocked, I said. Henry nodded. He put his arm around me. It wasn't a tentative gesture anymore. It was a blockade. He was placing himself between me and the world. The press is outside, Henry said. A reporter from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. They got wind of the police investigation into Granite Harbor. They know about the internal leak. Let them talk, I said. I have nothing to hide. I called a PR firm, Henry said. My firm uses them for crisis management. They are going to handle the statements. You don't have to say a word to anyone. I will be the shield. I looked at him. My husband. The man who hated conflict was hiring crisis management and preparing to fight the media. Thank you, I said. We walked out the side door to avoid the cameras. Detective Reyes called me at 6 o'clock that evening. We have Mark Halloway, she said. Her voice was crisp. He turned himself in an hour ago. He brought a laptop and a terrifying amount of documentation. He is singing. Leora. He is giving us everyone. The lawyer, Vance, your father, the notary ring, and Tessa, I asked. The warrant is signed, Reyes said. We are picking her up tomorrow morning at her apartment. We wanted to give you a heads up. Thank you, I said. And Leora, Reyes added. We found the override logs, the account that lowered the security alert on Christmas Eve. It wasn't Mark, it was Vance, but the command came from an IP address linked to your father's shell company. It is a massive web, but we are cutting the strands one by one. Good, I said. Burn it down. I hung up. I was sitting in my living room. The house was quiet. Henry was in the kitchen making tea. The curtains were drawn to keep out the prying eyes of the street. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the white envelope Tessa had given me. Leora. The handwriting was shaky but defiant. I ran my thumb over the wax seal. I could open it now. I could see what my grandmother wanted to say to me from beyond the grave, but I didn't. Opening it now felt like skipping to the end of the book. The story wasn't over yet. The climax was coming. The trial, the sentencing, the moment the gavel came down and the truth was stamped into the public record. This letter was my reward. It was the post-credits scene. It was the peace that would come after the war was won. I stood up and walked to the mantel. I placed the envelope next to the framed photo of Henry and me on our wedding day. "What's that?" Henry asked, walking in with 2 mugs. "Insurance," I said. I took the tea from him. "For the future?" Henry asked. "No," I said, looking at the envelope. "For the end." The Milwaukee County Courthouse was a fortress of limestone and granite, a building designed to make you feel the weight of the state before you even stepped through the metal detectors. On the morning of the sentencing hearing, the steps were crowded. The local press had descended on the story like vultures spotting a carcass. They had reduced the complex mechanics of interstate wire fraud and elder financial abuse into a tabloid headline: "The Blackmere Inheritance War Sisters Battle Over $2 million." I walked past the cameras holding Henry's hand. I wore the same navy suit I had worn to Granite Harbor Life. I wasn't there to give interviews. I was there to finish the audit. Inside, Courtroom 4B was packed. The air conditioner hummed. Struggling against the heat of too many bodies, I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table. Across the aisle, Tessa sat next to Mr. Sterling. She looked small, diminished, stripped of the bravado that had defined her for 30 years. My mother, Evelyn, sat 2 rows behind her, wearing a black veil as if she were mourning a death, though the only thing dead in this room was her reputation. The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Henderson, began her opening statement not with emotion, but with math. "This is not a family dispute," Henderson told the jury. "This is a calculation. Over a period of 18 months, the defendants engaged in a systematic attempt to defraud a dying woman of $2,240,000. They used 14 forged documents. They employed 3 separate fake notary stamps, and they utilized an inside man to bypass corporate security protocols." She projected the timeline Detective Reyes had built onto the screen. It was a damning graphic. The dots connected Tessa's computer, the Silver Comfort victims, and the internal servers of Granite Harbor Life. I watched the jury. They weren't looking at Tessa with pity. They were looking at the sheer volume of the paperwork. The Silver Comfort victims weren't physically present in the courtroom. Many were too frail or had passed away, but their names were read into the record. Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, widows and widowers who had trusted Tessa with their checkbooks. Then came the twist that sucked the air out of the room. "The state calls Mark Holloway," Henderson said. Mark walked to the stand. He looked like a man who had already been haunting a prison cell in his mind for weeks. He was sworn in. He sat down, avoiding the gaze of everyone in the room, especially me. "Mr. Holloway," Henderson asked, "did you knowingly ignore security alerts regarding the Blackmere policy?" "I did," Mark said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" Mark took a sip of water. His hand shook, the glass clicking against his teeth. "Because I was compromised," Mark said. 20 years ago, Leora's father helped me get my position at Granite Harbor. He taught me how the back end worked. When he left, I thought I was free. But when Tessa came to me last year, she didn't just ask for help. She showed me photos. She showed me proof of the favors I had done for her father back in 2005. She told me that if I didn't help her bypass the lock, she would send those photos to the SEC. A murmur rippled through the gallery. "So you lowered the security protocols on Christmas Eve?" Henderson asked. "No," Mark said. "I didn't have the clearance anymore. The corporate counsel. Mr. Vance did that. I just provided the window of opportunity." Mark looked up then, and for the first time, he looked directly at me. "But it didn't work," Mark said, his voice gaining a sudden, desperate strength. "Because of Eleanor." "Your grandmother?" Henderson asked. "She came to my office 5 years ago," Mark said. "She sat down and looked me in the eye. She said, 'Mark, I know you are a weak man. I know you will fold when my family pushes you. So I am not asking you to protect my money. I am forcing you.' She made me install the Clause 44 lock. She said, This lock is not for the thieves. It is for you, Mark, so that when they come for you, you can tell them you are powerless." I felt tears prick my eyes. Grandma hadn't just predicted Tessa's greed. She had predicted Mark's cowardice. She had built a system that accounted for every human failure in the chain. "I was afraid of Tessa," Mark confessed to the quiet room. "But I was terrified of Eleanor Blackmere. Even after she died, I felt like she was watching me from that file." When Mark stepped down, the defense tried to pivot. Tessa's lawyer argued that she was a victim of her father's manipulation. Then came Evelyn's turn. She didn't take the stand, but her lawyer tried to paint her as the oblivious mother, a woman who signed papers without reading them because she trusted her eldest daughter. "Mrs. Blackmere is a victim here," her lawyer argued. "She is a grieving mother who was handed documents in a time of distress." "Objection," Henderson said. "I would like to enter Exhibit G into evidence." It was the rejection letter I had pulled from the dumpster, the one with the legacy growth rider lie exposed. "This document," Henderson said, holding it up, "is a change of beneficiary form dated January 12th. It is signed by Tessa Blackmere, and it is witnessed by Evelyn Blackmere." Henderson turned to the jury. "But here is the catch. The metadata from the Granite Harbor server shows that this document was uploaded at 4 a.m, at that exact time. Mrs. Blackmere's phone records show she was on a call with Tessa for 45 minutes. Henderson projected the phone log. "And," Henderson continued, delivering the final blow, 3 days prior to this signature, Mrs. Blackmere received a certified letter from the Granite Harbor Legal Department informing her that the policy was locked and any attempt to change it without a court order would be considered fraud. She signed the return receipt." Henderson flashed the receipt on the screen. It bore Evelyn's distinct, looping signature. "She didn't sign blindly," Henderson said. "She signed 3 days after being warned that it was a crime. She wasn't a confused mother. She was an informed accomplice." Evelyn gasped. She stood up halfway in her seat. "I didn't read the letter. I never read the mail." "Sit down, Mrs. Blackmere," the judge barked. The illusion was shattered. Evelyn wasn't the matriarch holding the family together. She was just another person who thought the rules didn't apply to her because she was nice before the sentencing. Graham Whitaker, my grandmother's old lawyer, stood up. He walked to the front of the court with a limp, carrying a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor," Graham said, "Eleanor Blackmere left a statement to be read in the event of criminal litigation regarding her estate." The room went deadly silent. It was as if Eleanor herself had walked in. Graham put on his reading glasses. "My name is Eleanor Blackmere," he read. "If this note is being read, it means my granddaughter Leora has done her job. To my daughter Evelyn and my granddaughter Tessa, I loved you. But love is not a license to steal. You spent years waiting for me to die so you could harvest what I grew. You mistook my silence for ignorance. You mistook my thrift for poverty. There is a saying that family comes first. That is a lie. Integrity comes first. Without integrity, family is just a group of people who share a genetic code and a history of mutual destruction. I do not ask the court for leniency. I ask the court for accuracy. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. If they broke the law to get to the money, let the law do what it was designed to do." Graham lowered the paper. I heard a sob from the defense table. It was Tessa. She finally understood. Grandma hadn't hated her. Grandma had simply audited her and found her wanting. The verdict was swift. Tessa Blackmere, guilty on 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, sentenced 5 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Mark Halloway, guilty of conspiracy and aiding and abetting, sentenced 3 years, reduced for cooperation. Evelyn Blackmere, guilty of accessory to fraud, sentenced 2 years of house arrest and community service. Largely due to her age, the gavel banged. It was a sharp, final sound, the sound of a stamp hitting paper, processed. I walked out of the courtroom. The press was shouting questions, but Henry guided me through the crowd to our car. We drove in silence until we reached the lakefront. We parked near the spot where Grandma used to take me to feed the ducks, not with bread, which she said was bad for them, but with frozen peas she bought specifically for the purpose. "It's over," Henry said. He looked exhausted but proud. "Not quite," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the white envelope, the one Tessa had given me, the one Eleanor had told her to burn if she won, but give to me if she lost. I broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored stationery and a cashier's check. I looked at the check first. It was made out to the Eleanor Blackmere Trust. The amount was $50,000, the exact amount of the emergency fund Grandma had always kept hidden in her mattress. The money everyone thought was a myth. I unfolded the letter. "Leora, if you are reading this, the worst has happened, and the best has happened. The worst is that your family betrayed you. The best is that you stopped them. You are going to inherit the insurance money. It is a lot of money. $2 million changes people. It makes them soft. It makes them targets. Do not use this money to buy a bigger house. Do not use it to buy better clothes. You are boring, my dear, and that is your superpower. Stay boring. I want you to use the insurance payout to start a firm. Use this $50,000 as your operating capital. I want you to build a company that does for other old women what you did for me. I want you to audit the families. I want you to protect the silver comfort victims of the world. There are predators everywhere, Leora. Some of them manage banks. Some of them sit at the head of the Thanksgiving table. They rely on the fact that nobody reads the fine print. They rely on the fact that love makes people blind. You are not blind. You are the auditor. Get to work. Love. Grandma." I lowered the letter. The wind off the lake whipped my hair, but I didn't feel cold. "What does it say?" Henry asked. I handed him the letter. He read it, his lips moving silently. When he finished, he looked at me. "A firm?" Henry said. "She wants you to start a business." "She wants me to build a shield," I said. I looked out at the gray water. "She knew that putting Tessa in prison stops Tessa, but it doesn't stop the next Tessa, or the next Mark Halloway." "You would be good at it," Henry said. "You are terrifying when you have a file in your hand." "I am," I agreed. 6 months later, the sign went up on a small brick building in downtown Milwaukee, just 3 blocks from Granite Harbor Life. It wasn't a flashy sign. It was simple, black text on a white background. Blackmere Aldridge, Fiduciary Oversight, Elder Protection Services. We didn't have a grand opening. We didn't have balloons. We just unlocked the door and turned on the lights. My first client was Mrs. Gable, one of the women Tessa had scammed at Silver Comfort. We recovered $12,000 for her in the first week by auditing her maintenance fees. I didn't visit Tessa in prison. I didn't visit Evelyn in her house arrest. I sent them both a Christmas card, signed simply, Leora, no message, no malice, just a reminder that I was still here, and I was still watching. The revenge wasn't the prison sentence. The revenge wasn't the humiliation. The revenge was the work. Every time I stopped a son from draining his mother's account. Every time I caught a fake notary stamp. Every time I forced an insurance company to honor a locked policy. I was winning. My grandmother was right. Trust the paper. But more importantly, trust the person who is brave enough to read it. I sat at my desk, the legacy of Eleanor Blackmere surrounding me in stacks of perfectly organized files. I picked up a red pen, I opened a new contract, and I began to read. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey of justice and vindication. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Leora's decision. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Juliet Revenge Stories. Hit the like button and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe and always read the fine print.